Okay, good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the Oak Grove Community Building. Today is Monday, February 27th. Just a couple of housekeeping details before we get into tonight's Public Safety Awareness Forum, which we are doing on a monthly basis. I'd ask you please to place your phones on vibrate. I would also ask you to keep your conversation to a minimum. And then finally, what we're going to do is during the question and answer portion of tonight's forum, if you could just speak loudly so Malden Access Television has the opportunity to make sure that you're heard. A couple other notes before we begin. I do want to recognize our City Councilor at Large, David D'Arcangelo, in the back, and also Ward 3 City Councilor to my left, John Matheson. They, like you, are interested in what's going on, and I want to compliment them for taking the time in being here. We also had a couple of other councilors that couldn't make it tonight, unfortunately. I did speak with councilors Kinnan, Lucy, and the president, Judy Bucci, who did call in and make sure they know that they are interested, like you, in making sure that we're all on the same page with fighting crime across the city. A couple other housekeeping notes. I do want to make sure everyone here knows we have an invaluable resource, just like Lieutenant Molis is, and that's Tony Genzali. She's, Tony, can you raise your hand? She has been the energy behind the Neighborhood Crime Watch program that we now have established in the city. Her and her son, Michael, have spent a lot of time putting together resources to help residents combat crime on their own. So Tony is here. If there are any questions or if you're looking for additional information, she will share that with you during or after tonight's forum. The next online forum, which I'm happy to report, Friday we had 200 people participate, is going to be Tuesday, March 20th. And the difference this time is we're going to have it in the evening. The first two forums we had were during the day. It was tough for people that were working. So the next one will be on Tuesday, March 20th, and that'll be at 7 p.m. And if you log into maldenpatch.com or the city's website, cityofmalden.org, you'll be able to participate along with everyone else. The next Public Safety Awareness Forum will be at the Linden School. We're trying to get to each neighborhood throughout the course of the year. And that'll be held on March 26th at 6 p.m., and that'll be in the Linden School cafeteria. I'd also ask all of you, if you're not already, to please follow us on Facebook and Twitter. It's very simple. The city has set up accounts to, again, share information with you. And all it takes is one click and you'll get a lot of information as to what we're up to and how you can participate. So I'd ask you to do that as well. Finally, before we segue into hearing from Lieutenant Molis, I do want to recognize also Michael Crotty off to my right. He is our wire inspector, and one of the things that our administration has done from the outset is work closely with Mike on making sure that at a minimum, we have as many of our street lights up and running. So Mike and I have been meeting regularly on street lights that have been out, and I'm very happy to report on the 232 lights that the city owns, not National Grid. Back January 2nd, there were about 80 out. But thanks to Mike's efforts and National Grid, in particular Dan Cameron, Sean Gilligan, and Billy Tennett, they have repaired 51 of those lights. And those lights, the bulk of them were located at Florence, Main, Commercial, Summer, and Pleasant Street. And I'm very happy to report, because I see Clay Larson and Naomi Brave here, that we have our first LED light up. And that's at the corner of Commercial and what's the other street there?
I'm at a loss.
Yeah, me too. All the days everything's running together for me. So, but it's right near Dom's Sausage. If you happen to go by there, Panadosi Bakery, we have an LED light that we're testing to see whether or not we might want to use that moving forward. So, if there are any issues that you know of regarding street lights, please bring them to Mike's attention during or after tonight's forum. What we're also in the preparation of doing is have Mike do a short video that will be on the city's website as to how to report a street light, where to log it in, and who to follow up with if the light's not back up and running in a timely fashion. So with that being said, tonight is a very important meeting, not just for the residents that are gathered here, but for our entire city, because I am here to announce that we will be filing a plan with the Malden City Council to hire 4 additional police officers and 1 cadet within the next couple of weeks. The effective date of those hires will be April 1st, and obviously our plan is to annualize and make sure they are on for here on. A couple of caveats is 3 of the officers, again, we'll leave it to the experts as to where they patrol, but they'll be on the various shifts that now are part of the Malden Police Department. But the 4th officer, I'm going to ask Chief Holland to assign that officer to the downtown. And so without having the hours in mind, what I foresee is having an officer dedicated to Malden Square from 10 in the morning till 6 at night. That officer would be responsible from Main Street, up Pleasant Street, and around the MBTA area. I mean, as you know, the MBTA has the rights to the MBTA itself, but there's no reason why we can't patrol around that. So I'll be filing that plan with the Malden City Council in this week or 2, in the hopes that April 1st you'll see an increased presence of police officers around the city. So with that being said, I'm very pleased that no one's asked me how you're going to pay for that. I'll let you know. I'll make sure the city council knows that, obviously. But one of the things that we're going to try and employ our administration is, a priority-based budget model, which means what are the priorities of this city? And I think I've heard from you and everybody else around our community, and it's been to do everything we can to combat crime. So our plan is going to reflect your input, and pending city council action, hopefully you'll see more officers come April 1st and beyond. So with that being said, if there are no questions of me, I want to say that I'm very pleased. Again, if you don't know, my name's Gary Christensen. I'm the newly elected mayor, although I don't feel that way anymore. But I am very honored to be here. One of the things that I prided myself on as a school committee member and a city council was really finding every which way to be in touch with you, and making sure that we're all communicating from the same venue. So with that being said, one of the aspects of tonight's forum is we have Lieutenant Kevin Moelis, who I want to compliment, as I always do, along with Police Chief Holland, who had a prior commitment tonight, be here as a resource for you. And the way we've did it the first month is Lieutenant Moelis has gone back the past 28 days, taken a look at what has occurred in this area, and then he also will let us know prospectively what may be coming down the road the next 28 days. So with that being said, let me turn it over to Lieutenant Moelis, who after that will then get to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I appreciate the privilege of being able to represent the police department. I hope I do an adequate job, because when I'm here, I'm actually here on behalf of the patrol officers that work in the cruiser, which is the backbone of the police department, and all the detectives and the specialized units that are out there on a daily basis doing the work. So I'm here to listen to what you have to say, to share some information, but I really want to say that this is really me standing on behalf of the hard work that the men and women of the police department really do on a daily basis, and I really appreciate that, and it's a real privilege for me to be able to work with them. I've been on the police for 31 years, and I've lived in Malden my whole life. I live in Edgeworth, but I'm very familiar with Oak Grove. I currently have an assignment that puts me in pretty much all the neighborhoods in the city. I work with a group of officers that focus on problem areas in the city, and because of that assignment, I become very much aware of various events that take place in ways that we can be intervening. And I do interact with all the other agencies within the community, and particularly on the police department, so I do have a good overview on issues that have come up. As the mayor said, what I like to do when I do a talk before a specific neighborhood group is I like to look at previous incidents in that area and kind of familiarize myself a little bit more with things that might be taking place that you should know about. And when I look at recent events that have taken place in this general area, I'm happy to say that there are not any alarming crime trends that would cause someone to have a legitimate sense of fear or an unraveling of the fiber of their neighborhood. But I would also say that this area, like all areas of the city, and I live in the city myself, that there are some crimes that we should be a little bit more cognizant of in ways that we can minimize or prevent ourselves from becoming victims of crime. Now, recently, the department and the city put out a notice to the public based on some recent trends indicating an upsurge in house breaks. And I can tell you that last week I responded to a house break right around the corner here on Glenwood Street that happened during the daytime, the homeowner not being there. And it's kind of your classic house break. Most of our house breaks do happen during the day. The reason why they happen during the day is because the likelihood is the homeowner is not home, so the house breaker chooses an opportunity when the likelihood of the homeowner not being there. So I think that that type of crime is something that we are all potentially vulnerable to. But there are ways that we can minimize our exposure to being the victim of a house break. Some of them, you know, are common sense, but I'll say them anyways. The type of locks that you have in your house, the use of alarms. I know many people have chosen to go with alarms in their house as a deterrent. Neighbors being more aware of strangers in the neighborhood, and you know, a variety of ways that we can take to minimize ourselves from becoming the victim. Because in response to the uptick in the house breaks, what we did strategically, we put more officers in plain clothes throughout the city, and they were assigned to different locales. And as calls would come in of suspicious people, and actually one of the other things that the city and the department did is they put out a citywide telephone notice letting people know about the increase in daytime house breaks and asking them to be more aware of strangers in their neighborhood or behavior that is suspicious. So with that in mind, the people sitting in this room, you yourself are our best resource when it comes to solving crime. And many of the interventions that we successfully make is when somebody sees strange activity, somebody at their neighbor's door, somebody behind their neighbor's house, or a car that's parked in the neighborhood for a long period of time. And you know, this is where I want to emphasize something, because I talk to people all the time and they always say that they were reluctant to call the police. And the reason they were reluctant to call the police is because they weren't sure that what was going on was a crime. And you know, I want to assure you that if you have a gut feeling or you have an instinct that something is unusual and worthy of police intervention, I suggest that you call and not feel that you have this unusual burden on yourself to come up with so much evidence before you call us. Because I will tell you, it takes very, very brief amount of time for a person to break into your house and steal items. We were fortunate about a month or so ago, the unit that I work with the help of patrol officers, were able to apprehend 2 people that had just broken into a house on Oakland Street in Malden. They had a bag full of jewelry, electronic items, things that they could easily sell for short money to facilitate, you know, to use it for their drug use. But the bottom line is they were probably in the house for between 5 to 10 minutes. They kicked in the back door, went through the house, found the jewelry, found the items that they wanted that were valuable, and were out of the house within 5 or 10 minutes. It does not take long. One of the things I will tell you is prior to committing that crime, they had been observed by somebody that works with me at the front door of a house, and he got suspicious, and we were able to catch him because of his observations and his suspicions. So be mindful of that in your own neighborhood. If you see something that causes you to have some suspicion, please call the police. You can call anonymously. You don't have to identify yourself, but if you can call up and say, that there's somebody that was just knocking on doors, walking and looking in the yard, a motor vehicle that seemed to be circling the area. You know, any number of things that cause you to be suspicious would be something that would be worthy of a phone call to us and would absolutely generate a quick response from the police to the neighborhood. And even if it verifies that the person is there legitimately. I can tell you, a week ago, I stopped two people that were going up on some porches and coming off the porches, and I stopped and had a conversation with them, and they were handing out flyers for a pizza company. There was no harm in me stopping them and identifying them and finding out that they were there for a legitimate reason. So that's the type of activity that we want you to call us when you observe it. And I can tell you absolutely, as a result of that information that was provided on the phone to the public, the police department was able to intervene and catch people in the act of breaking into someone's house. So I would say house breaks during the day is something that are a reality of life, and there are ways that we can minimize our exposure to that type of crime. So, you know, please keep yourself mindful of that. Another crime that I do see when I read reports, and it happens late at night, overnight, breaks into automobiles. And there is a recurring trend sometimes. People leave their cars unlocked, and they leave valuables in their car. Now, those are two things we can all prevent. We can lock our car, and we cannot leave valuables in the car. Now, because people that commit these type of crimes walk around the neighborhood looking for the vehicle that's unlocked, or looking for the vehicle that has a laptop or a GPS, or even a wallet, or even money actually laying out in the console. So, again, to minimize the likelihood of being a victim of a crime, these things might sound like very common sense pieces of advice, but I'm telling you that there are people that do leave their vehicles unlocked, and there are people that leave valuables inside their vehicle. And there are even people that might think that because they hide their GPS under the seat, the thief is not going to realize that, but they don't realize that the thief sees that they have the power device still in the socket, so the person is easy to conclude this person probably has a GPS. So B&Es into houses and B&Es into motor vehicles would be two crimes that people can take some pretty common sense measures to minimize their exposure. Another area that this general area would be characterized by would be the proximity to the T station. Now, I don't know how many people use the T, but I work at night quite a bit, and I park near the Malden Center MBTA station and this station. And there's a recent phenomena that with the increase in cell phones and music devices, that when people get off the train and walk home, they're completely oblivious to their surroundings. They have no idea that someone is following them, because I've actually followed people and then walked up and kind of said, "Excuse me, I'm with the police, I've been following you for quite a bit of time here, and I don't think you noticed me." So, if I was to give you one message on that, it is not to be paranoid or in complete fear when you're walking home, but just be a little bit more mindful of your surroundings, because the use of electronic devices tends to make people isolate themselves from their surroundings. And I will tell you this, because I have had conversations with people that commit these crimes. Most of the knowledge that the police get on how crimes are committed comes from criminals that tell us, you know, openly how they commit a crime. And a mugger or someone that's going to rob somebody can actually sit or stand near a T station and see 100 people come off that train, and probably, if he's schooled in that type of crime, pick someone that's most vulnerable to that crime. And you can minimize your vulnerability by being more aware of your surroundings. And I will actually, you know, like to echo what the mayor said and give him and Mike Crotty some credit. The illumination around those areas is very important. Because I will tell you that the mayor and I went out and rode around in an area near the Malden Center MBTA station, and he took note of some of the lights that were out in order to create better illumination to minimize victims. So, you know, and I also want to tell you something else, because I live in Malden too, that I would encourage everyone here, if there is an issue in your neighborhood where you see a deficiency, like there's a light out, call up and report that light being out. Sorry, Mike, I'm not trying to, right, but these are things that the police would call neighborhood hazards. A neighborhood hazard is something that could expose you to risk or increase the likelihood of crime. A hazard doesn't have to be something that's an immediate danger. It's something that just kind of minimizes the safety in your neighborhood. So keep that in mind. I mean, you know your street better than we do. So if there are things in your neighborhood that you feel are deficient, you know, please make them known to the right people, because lighting minimizes the likelihood of becoming the victim of a crime. So in and around the T station is something that I think you should pay attention to if you do use that station, or if somebody in your family is using the train for transportation, you know, just remind them that listening to music is enjoying to do, but it also can make you isolated from your surroundings, and also talking on the phone. But having a phone is a good thing, because you can also call for help. That reminds me of one thing I've come across quite a bit. If you call 911 on your cell phone, my belief is it's going to get directed to the state police. That minimizes the ability for us to get the information. So a lot of people are better served by pre-programming the Malden police phone number on their phone. I don't know if everybody does that, but that might be a good thing to do, because then when you call Malden police, it's going to come right to us. So if you want to do that, I think you all know our emergency number is 781-322-1212, and that would get you right through to us if you wanted to do that.
There's no location that's to do with that, right? It's just a push phone.
Excuse me? Would that give you a little?
If you dial 322-1212, that's
Yeah.
just delivering voice. There's no latitude and longitude that goes with that, right?
I don't believe so.
Yeah, I think Framingham is the only one that's equipped in the whole state to take in a lat long.
Really? So that would mean that the where you were calling from would be recorded at the police station?
If you dial 911 anywhere in the state of Massachusetts, right now they are all transferred into Framingham
Right.
police barracks, and they in turn, based on the lat long that they receive, channel it back to the appropriate public safety answering point throughout the state.
Right.
I'm not saying don't call 912.
Right, right.
Sometimes I think that's even better, and I can tell you a couple of instances. Most people, if they dial 911, think they're getting
Right,
same all.
right, and it's a.
And then they'll start talking about spatafores on the corner, by the gas station.
No, this is a
Everybody
huge
running
problem.
through
This
those,
is a huge problem, because you think you're giving timely information to someone who
Yeah.
understands, and it's really not a good thing. And it's actually nice to see people doing their phones right now. It makes me feel good that we're passing on good information. 781-322-1212 would be the emergency number for the police. And there's also a business number, but I think you want to store the emergency one in. So that's good to see people doing that. One area that I have a good amount of experience in, because I spent a good amount of years involved in it, is in the drug unit. So I can tell you that I had a conversation with Sergeant Richard Corielli, who's in charge of the drug unit right now, who I work very closely with. And I can tell you that drugs continue to be a reality, not only in our community, but based on my conversations with officers from the surrounding areas, it's a reality in all the surrounding communities too. Malden is absolutely not in a worse position than some even the more affluent communities. And I will tell you one thing, we actually have more resources directed toward drug enforcement than some of the surrounding cities and towns. We have an allocation of officers to the drug unit that I think puts us far ahead of some of our neighboring communities. But I will tell you that drugs continue to be an area of concern for law enforcement and for society in general. I will tell you absolutely that many of the people that we apprehend breaking into houses or committing, crimes involving theft do have drug histories, and that their crime is committed to fuel their drug habit. So the relationship between drugs and other crime is very real. So the reality of drugs in this, you know, area is something that is something that we take very seriously. The drugs of abuse continue to be on the priority for the detriment that they have to people and society would be opiates like heroin. When you get into pharmaceuticals, Percocet, 30s are very popular now for drug of abuse, and along with OxyContin, and then cocaine and crack cocaine. And then marijuana is very prevalent because it's a very lucrative drug for sale. You know, there's a huge profit generated from that. So there is actually crime as an offshoot to marijuana sales because drug dealers being robbed by people that know that. So drugs are still a pressing issue that the police are dealing with. One thing I will tell people is if you want to come up to me afterwards, I'll give you my cell phone number. If anybody would like me to have a more private, specific discussion with them about drugs, I would be glad to do that. I can show you drug samples to give you an idea what the different drugs look like, so you can become more aware of it if you see it, if you have kids. And I would be more than willing to do that for you. So, you know, with that in mind, I think, does anybody now have any questions that you would like me to bring back to the police department regarding what's going on in your area?
Yeah, before we do, we just also want to make sure everyone here knows about the Mayor's Housing Task Force, which is a force that was put together back in 1996 to address problematic properties. We are currently retooling the group. It's now going to be called the Problem Properties Unit, and it's going to focus not only on residential but also commercial. So I'd ask you to watch in the next several weeks. You should see some new information that will allow you to get us the information we need to address the property. One other thing, and then we're going to get right to your questions, is tomorrow at noon, we're going to announce the formation of a task force to look at bringing a teen center to Malden. One of the things that we've heard during the past year is that the schools do a really good job before school, during school, and after school. But there's that void between 4, 8, 9, 10 p.m., and we're going to try and fill it. So tomorrow, we'll be announcing at noontime at City Hall this creation of the force. It'll be working in conjunction with the Malden YMCA, YWCA, and the Partnership for Community Schools. They'll be coming back with a report and recommendations that we can hopefully adopt that will allow Malden to have its own teen center moving forward. So with that being said, we'll now get to the most important part of tonight, and that is your questions. So by show of hands, anybody have a question? Go right ahead, Clevit.
For the people that weren't here for the last meeting at the BB school, and so they weren't part of the discussion about the properties, the vacant properties, could you correlate bringing up the problem properties with safety and crime?
Yeah, right, good point. Yeah, one of the things that we've found, you know, over the years is that a lot of the problems that we have in neighborhoods like this emanates from 1 or 2 properties. And so what we're trying to do is retool our resources to make sure that property is being addressed in a timely fashion so it's less of a problem long-term. I was a ward council for 8 years, and I've seen firsthand what one house can do to an entire street. And so what we're doing now is, you know, regathering the force. We're changing the members up a little bit. We're adding policy and procedures. We're going to have a link on our website that's going to allow you to anonymously, you know, report a property to us. There's also going to be one phone number that you'll be able to use to let us know about a property that's given neighborhood problems. Before, what we found is, you know, people weren't quite sure who to call. If they did call one department, they might have got routed to another department. So we're looking to create sort of this streamlined effort for people to let us know about illegal apartments, legal rooming houses, people with a lot of code violations, because I think our feeling is if we can get at those properties, that would really help us go a long way in making sure that there's, you know, less problems for the neighborhoods, you know, for good neighbors like you.
There are also foreclosed homes going right across the street from me. There's a truck parked outside of it all day today. But it really, it's not on the market, there's no activity with it, it's becoming more and more run down looking.
Yep.
You know, I think that's probably a bigger problem than deal with on a local level?
No, it isn't actually. We're toying around with an ordinance that would allow us to require these banks to provide a bond, which we would then use to maintain the property. Part of the problem we've had in the past is it just hasn't been that connection. So when a bank took ownership of the property, they just would leave it unattended for several years. So we've been looking at the city of Springfield, who has adopted an ordinance that does just that. So we're looking to see if we can do the same thing here in Malden. So again, to Claudette's point, a home unattended that has, weeds and everything else you can think of, it's not gonna help us moving forward. So that's part of this problem properties unit, what they're looking at moving forward. So we'll keep you posted on that. You should see very soon, opportunities for you to be able to get us the information that we need to address the problem. Other questions? Yes.
I know you said that the teen center is something you're going to announce out tomorrow, but as a Malden Girl Scouts, it was something that I had had a discussion with you at one point, and the fact that there's so few places within the city that we can actually have troop meetings because we can't be in the public schools. Would that be something where there would be, different rooms that people could, reserve to have these types of events?
Yeah, I think that would be the hope. I haven't really thought it through too far, but the idea behind the teen center was it would be a place for what the students have told us. They need a spot to be able to debrief. I mean, everything's MCAS heavy today, so I think a lot of the students have told us that they would love an opportunity for a place that they could go after school and just be able to really unwind. So that's the main thrust behind the center, but I'm sure, ideas like you're talking about would also be part of, whatever we are able to put together. We've actually sampled, this isn't something that we've just come up with yesterday. We've had a bunch of teen nights during the past year, and they've been wildly successful. The most recent one that was held at the YMCA had 150 kids. So we think the potential's there. It's something that, I heard about loud and clear on the campaign trail, and so tomorrow's announcement will be an effort to help us get to where I think we need to go moving forward. Other questions?
Yes.
Yes.
So with problem property, to go back to that topic.
Sure.
Two things. Do you think that the Oak Grove train station is a problem property? No one takes care of it. It certainly doesn't look like Malden Station. Trash all over the place. It's always the residents that live here that are down on Washington Street picking up the mess that comes from that. I mean, I've been complaining about this for probably, I don't know, 20 years now. How long the train station?
Yeah, right,
for me a long
right,
time.
right.
And kind of comes and goes in waves. Somebody makes a couple of calls to the train station, it's good for like a month, and then everything goes right back to the way it is. I mean, just nobody ever really seems to. It's almost like, I feel like when you live in Oak Grove, it's the end of the line, you're at the end, you're going to storm for tomorrow. I don't really think that anybody really takes care of the property in Central Malden,
Yeah,
other than the people who live here that try to keep up with that constant mess.
all right. You want to take that one?
Do you mean physically within the confines of the MBTA
Yeah.
property, things like cosmetic upkeep, like trash and
I'm talking about
graffiti?
dirty diapers and
Right.
constant trash, and it would be in that parking lot, but it's also along the side roads of both sides of Washington Street. Now, I live on Oak Grove Court, which is a little street off of Washington Street, just a few doors down, and I can tell you that trash blows up right up my driveway.
Right.
Every single day. Newspapers, the receptacle newspapers that they have out there all the time. Complain about them, they'll move them, 3 weeks later, they put them little by little, they all come back. It's that constant mess that nobody ever cleans up after. And it's funny, in the summertime, talk about risky, when you talk about poor illumination versus light, having good lighting.
Right.
They have an empty lot. I used to talk about this with Jim Nestor a lot. And I know at one time they were looking at maybe taking the fence down and making that some part of a park. Because in the summertime, when those weeds grow high, they're almost as high as a person. And you could certainly get through that fence. There's nothing that's going to stop anybody from committing some type of a crime inside of that. And I call that a risky area. And it's not until I make 3 or 4 phone calls that somebody actually comes down and cuts the grass.
Yeah.
I actually go out there with the clippers myself.
I don't know where that stands. It might be worth you talking to the counselor again about where that,
Yeah.
possibility lies. One of the things that we are doing, unrelated, but maybe related, is we're currently meeting with vendors to, sort of modernize our recycle bins. As many of you know, we've completely outgrown the 18-gallon bins, so we're in negotiations on what it would cost us to get not only larger bins, but also covered bins. So we'll keep you posted on that. We are actively looking at modernizing, the program on that end. So let me go over here.
Just to add to what you were saying, I mean, I have the same problem. The wind just blows everything straight into my car.
Sure.
Port area. But there doesn't seem to be any public trash places to put trash.
Right.
When you're coming out of the train and the store, I mean, the sidewalk's pretty well littered. There's a lot of scratch tickets.
Right.
And stuff that people are just buying
Yeah.
them, walking along, scratching them, just letting it go, throwing Dunkin' Donuts cups everywhere.
Right.
I mean, even people walking down the street, I've witnessed throwing, after they've eaten their McDonald's meal, just throwing the whole packet straight down on the floor. There's
Yeah.
nowhere to put anything.
Yeah, we're also looking at, trying to maybe do what our sister city, Everett, has done, with the environmental compactors that they have. Part of the problem when you have a program that's producing, the statistics that PAYT is, one of the downfalls is that, people are, using some of the public barrels to dispose of their trash. So what happened, I think, and I'm not sure of the exact locations, but the city was removing barrels for that reason. But to me, I think, we have to look at a different way. What that way is, I'm not sure, but it's not removing every public barrel. But it's also trying to make sure that we don't have people dumping either. So we're actively in talks with, haulers and vendors to see what we might be able to do. I'm intrigued with what Everett's done on that, again, those environmental friendly compactors that they have in Broadway. So that's one avenue that we're pursuing here in Malden. But again, in the next several months, you should see some news out of the mayor's office and the city council as to, what direction we're gonna take.
What about
Questions?
accountability? If you see,
Let me go here and then I'll come your way right after, okay?
If a patrol officer sees somebody, dropping something, can he issue a fine? I mean, does that happen on a daily basis, or?
Littering is, statutorily regulated. I do not know that it's something that is widely enforced based on the realities of what a patrol officer's daily activity is, and secondarily, based on the widespread nature of littering. As we can come up with a million scenarios, whether it be somebody that technically throwing a cigarette on the ground, a scratch ticket, or a Dunkin' Donuts cup. It would be so prevalent, you would almost need somebody designated to litter enforcement, just for that very crime. I actually have heard, radio calls of officers finding people illegal dumping, going to dumpsters that, people commercially own and throwing trash in and things like that. But with regard to the daily littering that you're describing, I would say you might have an officer that would say to somebody, you know what you just did, pick that up. I mean, but.
Yeah, we do have, the other thing we are trying to do is we're running those sweepers as much as we possibly can. With the good winter that we've had them out there almost on a daily basis. So, we are trying to keep up as much as we can. But I think the answer really lies, I think when you were talking about, is the recycling aspect of this program. We have to beef up, from where we are now. We've completely outgrown, the 18-gallon bins. So we're looking at what the next step up is for us, and we'll keep you posted on that end. Let me go right here.
I have two questions. One is in general, waste amount, but it kind of goes for all the parks.
Sure.
What is the exact curfew that if you notice people going into a park at night that you can call? I mean, 'cause we have a lot of problem with kids going up there and partying.
Right.
You never know, like, at what point you can call and say they're up there, they shouldn't be up there.
Oh, it's funny you say that.
And also, I'm assuming you can call if you go up and you see that there's tents, that there's actually
Right.
people living there
Yeah.
during the day. Because I know part of the problem is when we call and complain during the day, we're told there's nothing you can do, people can be congregating in the area.
Right.
And then the second question is, luckily it hasn't happened this year, but last year we had a lot of incidents of people parking in front of my house at all hours smoking pot. And I would call the cops, and a lot of times they would come and they would just kind of talk to the people nothing would happen. And I actually had a long conversation with Captain Emerald, and I was like, can't you write a ticket or something? And they were saying, no, with the new law, that you really couldn't, because I was like, if you just kind of, there was only one incident where there was a bunch of kids that they actually made them park the car overnight because they were underage. But this year, they're not doing as much because they probably think I'm a crazy lady. She with a flashlight, like, what are you doing? But I'm just wondering, what is the sense, because I kind of had a conversation with him that, you know, isn't there a way to, I mean, you can write parking tickets, you can't write tickets if people are sitting in front of your house doing drugs?
Right. Well, let me go on a couple of things. I was up Waits Mountain today, and I believe the signage up there says 8 p.m., I think, to use the...
Because it used to be 10.
Right, it used to be 10, but I think Waits Mountain is regulated to 8 p.m.
Okay.
Most parks in general, particularly in the summertime, it's 10 p.m. is when they are technically closed. And if someone is in the park after 10 o'clock, usually in the beginning, we give them a warning, but technically you would be subject to arrest if you were, you know, in defiance of the law. On a secondary note, with regard to marijuana enforcement, I think what the captain was rightly saying to you was that when the legislature, through a vote, decriminalized the use, personal use of possession of less than an ounce of marijuana, it no longer became a crime for purposes of police enforcement. But they did create a civil mechanism where a person could be given a ticket. Now that sounds good, but there are a lot of flaws in the ticketing process. For example, I don't believe that a person has to identify themselves to the police. So the police officer would not even know who he was issuing this ticket to. It's my belief, though, that the city of Malden has passed an ordinance which says that you cannot openly consume marijuana in public. The city has passed that law. So there are some things in place that are subject to discretionary enforcement by the police in that regard. So there are some tools at our disposal, but I agree with what the captain said. She was, on a state level, when that was decriminalized, they created a lot of loopholes and flaws that make it very difficult for the police to deal with. But it doesn't mean that we can't intervene, and it doesn't mean someone can just sit in front of your house and smoke marijuana openly. That's not the case.
You know, the other thing that's out there too, that, you know, we haven't been able to get any consensus on is going to a residential permit parking program, which would address, I think, you know, one of your concerns about just having someone randomly parking out in front of your home. We were close last year, but we just couldn't get anywhere on the number of visitor permits that a home would be issued, so we kind of tabled the proposal. But, you know, with a new council in effect, you know, maybe it's a program that gets picked back up and looked at, because Somerville, Cambridge, Everett, you know, they have the programs, and they claim to us that it's helped them, you know, kind of keep an eye on who's in the neighborhood. It's another mechanism for them. So we'll see where it goes on our end. I think I saw a hand. Let me go here, and then we'll go over there next. Go right ahead.
I had a
Oh,
question
all right.
about the...
Let me come back to you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go
About
ahead.
the MBTA. And another really dangerous area is the staircase that goes from Washington Street to Lyle Street. One of the steps is actually broken. It's a cement staircase, but the cement is crumbled in areas, so that if you're walking down and you're not paying attention, you could just absolutely twist your ankle and fall down the
Okay.
staircase. But before you go on to something else, I was wondering if you would just explain that permit parking a little bit more?
Yeah, I don't have all the particulars in front of me, but we talked about last year in conjunction with the police department about, you know, implementing a permit parking program whereby certain hours of the night, you know, you'd be required to have a sticker to park on a public street, right? So we crafted the proposal, we went out and had public hearings on it. We just couldn't get a real strong consensus on the time that it would be in effect and the number of visitor permits that a household would have. So what happened was, you know, we wanted to wait until the new council took office and take another fresh look at whether or not it's something that, you know, our community wants. Again, most of our sister cities and towns have one in place, and the reports back to us, it's helped them. For instance, if there was a house party that was completely out of control, one of the things with a permit parking program is that the police could go up and sweep the street, and any car that, you know, didn't have a sticker in theory, you know, could be tagged, and that usually is an impetus for you know, a party to break up if they know that there's about to be a, you know, a tagging all the way down until the street ends. So we'll see what happens. It's back, you know, again, we're in a new session, so we'll see what this new body has to say about it, but
Many of the streets around the station already have
correct.
parking.
This will be a
permits?
citywide one we were
Okay, so
looking at
they're
doing.
not gonna eliminate that?
No,
Okay.
no, it's only to enhance. So let me go back here and then we'll go in the back.
Kind of a thought I have about the illegal roaming houses.
Sure.
You know, so-called sober treatment and crime. What do you do, Lieutenant, when you see, and I see these people all the time when I'm walking, I'm driving, you just see these sort of random men, and they're men, they look like they're probably 30s, 40s, walking around with their, you know, all their belongings in a bag, and, you know, I mean, you know, they're obviously homeless, or they're living in some, I mean, why would you walk around with their belongings?
Right.
Do you ever, like, do you stop these people and say, hey, where you going, where you know?
Yes, I'll give you, all right, very briefly, I'll tell you that one of the things that the Malden Police prides himself on is the lack of citizen complaints that we get. In order for the police to walk up to someone and actually say to them, stop, I want to talk to you, that's a Fourth Amendment seizure under the law. In order to do that, you have to have reasonable suspicion that that person committed a crime. Now, that doesn't mean that if somebody is walking through your neighborhood and I want to talk to them, that I can't. It just changes the way that I talk to them. So what I have to then do is get out of my car and say, good morning, how are you today? Can I talk to you for a second? It's more of an invitation, but there's a good reason for that. A person walking down the street, not committing any wrong, is entitled to continue walking down the street without the police bothering them. But I do know what you mean, that there are a number of people that are recovering from drug problems that do frequent these general areas that cause people to have a feeling of unease or suspicion. What we have to do is create some balance between how the police interact with them and protect your sense of well-being, but also the constitutional rights of those people. And there are ways that we can interact with them, but absent of any suspicion that a crime has happened, it has to be done in the context of what is known legally as an encounter, where there is no stop, I want to search you, you have to produce an identification. But in these areas, particularly with house breaks, you know, occurring, we are aware of people that are walking around, and we do get out and we do interact with them and we do talk to them. And I will tell you, it's a very preventive thing that we don't have any statistical way of knowing that if I get out of the car, or one of the patrol officers gets out of his car and has a conversation with somebody who's walking down the street, and that person was planning on breaking into a house that day, they will not break into a house that day because the police had a conversation with them. Because it throws them out of their routine. In their mind now, they're like, I will not break into a house, I'm getting away from this neighborhood because the cops know who I am.
And
So
I-
there is a very good strategic tool for the police to get out and initiate field encounters with people on the street, as you're saying.
Right, and I saw it firsthand when I went with Lieutenant Molis, a couple kids behind a building. Good evening, how you doing? That started the conversation. And, you know, it's sort of, I always equate it to one of my favorites, you know, First Blood with Sylvester Stallone. You know, the sheriff says, good morning, how you doing today? That got the conversation. Didn't turn out too well for the sheriff, but it does work, believe it or not. You know, just that, how you doing today? How's everything going? And that just gets the conversation going, and it leads one thing to another. And that particular night, you know, Lieutenant Molis was able to resolve what could have been, you know, a different outcome. So,
They were casing me one on Saturday, and then on Tuesday tried to break into 2 houses. And one of them was from St. Francis House in Boston, so
Right.
you know, that's a straight shot on the tee.
yeah.
No, and I'll tell you that the two that we caught breaking into the house on Oakland Street gave the Pine Street Inn as their address.
Yeah.
And they had hypodermic needles in their pocket when they were arrested, and had an absolute criminal record that included, drug history and, thievery. So there is an absolute relationship between drug abuse and crime because they do not have the means to buy their drugs. So that there's an absolute correlation to that. So again, what I said earlier, if you see people in your neighborhood that do not, in your opinion, there's something that doesn't add up to you, there is no harm in calling the police because you're not getting anyone in any trouble if they are not committing a crime. And there might be a time when you call and say there's two people walking down the street and the police come and they conclude that they have no legal basis to stop them, but that, I think you would still feel better knowing that you called.
Yeah, but one of the things we have done under Lieutenant Mullis is created this interaction unit where Lieutenant Mullis is leading a couple of other officers, during the late night shift to address, situations that you described. So that's something that the City Council, Mayor Howard, Chief Holland got behind, and, Lieutenant Mullis is, I've seen it firsthand, the great job that I think is happening with that unit. We just have to get them some more bodies. That's the biggest thing. We have 74 patrol officers for a city of 60,000 people. So that's why I wanted to, start addressing that tonight with you by announcing that we'll be adding 4 officers and 1 cadet in April. So let me go back. I know you had your hand up.
Yeah, just 2 questions. The easy one first. That possible proposal of the parking,
Sure.
was the thought for the homeowner or the car owner to have a fee associated with that ticket, that sticker?
Yes, on the stickers, there were different plans. Again, I'd have to pull out my folder. One of them was you would get a free sticker with your, when you pay your excise tax bill. And one of the theories behind doing it that way is then we would be able to, find out who is not paying their excise tax like they should be. Then there was another plan where it would have been, I think, $5 for the sticker. So there were a multitude of plans being bandied about. Most of the cities and towns we looked at, they do charge, I thought it was $20, $25 a year for a sticker.
Why the fee?
Well, administration of the program, if you're gonna go citywide, there's a lot of streets, a lot of terraces, a lot of places to cover. So ostensibly, you'd have to have, personnel and resources dedicated to the administration of the program. So that was part of the reason. But again, that wasn't really the issue anyway, because I think we had kind of addressed that by saying we weren't gonna charge for the initial, the homeowner. But the one thing we couldn't get our arms around is the hours and the visitor permits. There was no consensus whatsoever.
How would we find out, and this is the second.
Sure.
How would we find out myself? For example, it's my first meeting.
Welcome.
Thank you. Not too much in tune with what's going on, but I definitely want to know about other fees and such coming down, because I got hit with that trash bag one. It was a surprise to me.
You're not alone.
So, how do,
Well, I think a couple of ideas right off the top. I think if you're on Facebook, you hit like.
No.
All right. Twitter.
No.
Do you have an email address?
I do.
Yeah, if you can get that to, we have a couple of people here from the mayor's office, Carol Ann Desiderio. If anybody else for that matter, Karen Hayes, if you have an email address, we're going to be starting up within the next month or so a citywide email newsletter,
Okay.
which will, let you know what we're up to before it happens. So again, if you can get that information to Karen and Carol Ann, one of the two,
Great.
we'll get you signed up for that.
The second question that I had was in correlation with the trash bags. I've come across a couple of situations where I want to throw out, a bed, and it takes me a month to throw out a bed. One mattress 1 week, another mattress, headboard, 2 railings, so on and so forth. We're limited to 1. So I guess the question is, have you seen dumping since the implementation of the program? What I would assume where people say, what, I'm gonna dump this down the street.
Yeah.
And secondly, has there been any discussions about people being able to toss out, I understand one large item, but have there been situations that people have said, hey, look, I want to throw out my bed, I want to throw out a bureau or something?
Do you want to address that, Lieutenant? No.
With regard to
Dumping?
huge, I'm not aware of a big uptick because of that. Because it's one a week, right? It's one
Yes.
bulk item a week
Yeah,
you
one
can do
bulk
right
item
now.
a week, so
Right.
if you And that bulk items, that basically anything that does not fit into a trash bag.
Right.
And so, I couldn't throw it in a mop. They said,
Right.
it's gotta be in a trash bag.
Well, and you can always, I think, you know, the advantage of our program compared to other cities and towns, most cities and towns charge for that bulk item. You know, we do not. And then I think your other avenue, I mean, it's easier said than done, but you can always bring items, you know, to the DPW. That one bulk item is for pickup, you know, at your home. So,
Yeah, but at least the conversation I've had with the guys is if it doesn't fit in a blue bag, it's a bulk item.
yeah,
So I've thrown out the children's toys, and I've got, you know.
yeah. Well, you know, let's,
There's toys all over the place.
Yeah,
so like
right.
You know, little thing that you patio, I've got 4 or 5 of those things hanging around.
right.
Nope, only one. We
Yeah.
can take one.
All right. But I don't think, you know, to the lieutenant's point, I haven't, as a ward council for 8 years, I didn't see a big uptick in, you know, illegal dumping of bulk items. But, you know, again, what I would do is make sure you're signed up with us, so if there is a question you might have on the program, you know, we can try and get it answered for you as quickly as possible. Let's go to other questions.
Well, I agree with them. I mean, you may not be dumping it, but in my neighborhood, they just put it on their front porch, on the side of their house, in their backyard, in their front yard, and it's making the city of Malden just look run down.
Right.
Because they don't wanna put the one item out of it. So by the time that one item, you know, the bedroom furniture is being dumped, we're talking like 6 months now going by.
Right.
So I think that's making the city look really dumpy.
And again, we have an avenue there, Lieutenant Mullis, with the Board of Health.
Yeah, you know, there was an incident that occurred within the past week. It's funny you say that the mayor and I actually got involved with. There was a house, had a mattress on the front lawn for 2 or 3 weeks. I went by and rang the bell, and I said, is there any reason why you haven't thrown this out? They said, we didn't know we could, so they had to move it onto the sidewalk. It's gone, but I know what you mean. They were leaving it on their property, so it's gone. So I would say, I mean, it's something like that, if you see someone that has obvious trash that they probably want to discard that they haven't, when this problem properties unit is up and running and the ability to intake the information is, if you get that information to us, that might be something so simple as a member of that task force to go to that house and say, do you realize that you can put that desk out on the sidewalk? Because the people that I encountered a couple of weeks ago didn't even know that they could do that. So that might be a solution, just going up and knocking on the door and saying, do you realize that it's free for you to put that in the sidewalk? And,
No, I think they realize it, but if you get a new bedroom set, you get rid of the old bedroom set, you're literally gonna put one piece out a week.
Yeah.
By the time that actually moves, we're talking the whole summer goes by and.
Yeah.
Took me a month to go
Bedroom
up
set,
there.
yeah, you look at
Took
some
me a
bedroom
month.
set
All right.
on the front lawn.
All right, let me go in back, and then we'll go up front, and then I see we have the sketch group here, and one thing I've learned in my career, always yield to the sketch group, because you don't want a bad sketch of yourself, right? So let me get to the question. Go right ahead.
Do we have any surveillance cameras in the Oak Grove or the Malden cities?
Yeah.
yes. Yes, within the past year or so, it's my understanding that the city has explored and acquired technology to put surveillance in various parts of the city. And I know from speaking to the mayor and from other members of the city council, the long-term goal would be to expand on that and also to make sure that the system that's in place is up and working at all times. So it is an initiative that they have, in theory, embraced.
Would that be something that would be paid for by the taxpayers in Malden, or can we ask for the MBTA to?
Believe me, I'd love to ask the T, but they're 161, you know, some odd million in the hole, I think, right? Is it 161, something like that? They're 5 billion, I think, long-term in trouble. So we've taken upon ourselves not to wait for anyone else. We're doing this ourselves. So through the city council, Mayor Howard, Chief Holland, the police department, we have 20 cameras that are out and about, and we're looking to go to 30 in the upcoming year. And it's not being done on a new fee to the ratepayer. We're just using existing funds from within to get those cameras, installed. Let's just do a couple more questions. Let me go in the back. Steve,
Okay, I took a T
Yeah,
in Boston 2 weeks ago.
you're next. Yes.
And the graffiti and the trash in the back of the buildings along, going to Malden Station. no, it looks pretty bad.
Okay, so we'll
Just
take a
looking-
look at that.
Just looking out the
Lieutenant.
windows, a lot of graffiti on the back of the businesses,
Right.
trash and graffiti, all the way to Wellington,
No, good point, and that's the first thing they see coming in, so, yeah, we'll take a look, see what we can do on that. We just got our anti-graffiti, program back up and running, so we'll get that on the list. That's between Wellington and Malden Center,
Well, between Oak Grove and Wellington, yeah.
these buildings too? Okay, all right, we'll take a look.
Yeah,
Go right
yeah,
ahead.
Yeah, right over there, yes.
Yep. Okay, the question was, what's being done about, the illegal rooming houses? Again, we're in the process of, retooling the group that was put together previously.
One of the other councilors, that they were fined $24,000. This was 5 years ago. They're still operating, they get off the T, they come in, change, they put in a parking lot,
Yeah.
2 or 3 of them, great big houses.
Yeah, I can't speak to what's happened in the past. What I've done is, try to revamp what the group looks like now, and also to try and come up with some mechanisms that'll make it easier on you to report, the information that we need to act on. So one of the things I see happening is, for those that are tech savvy, you'll be able to go on soon and enter the complaint or the concern right online. That form will then come to us, and we'll be able to track it and be able to see it through to its end. Problem is, right now, we don't really have a central database that all the people on the task force can see. This will do that. So anyone at any time will be able to go in and see, okay, Board of Health was there last week. Okay, building department's going in next week. For those that don't have computers, there's gonna be a central phone number, one phone number, that you'll be able to call and let us know what's going on in the neighborhood. I think in the past, we've tried different phone numbers in different departments. We're gonna try and really streamline it, so you'll only have to call one number, which will get the ball rolling with this unit. We gotta wrap up. How many more hands do we have? Let me see, just one. Is that all right, Sketch? You can, one more question? You gonna ask a question too? No? All right, go right ahead.
Questions. You said most home invasions are during the day. What about the auto invasions? Are they mostly during the day or
No.
night or all over?
The B&Es into motor vehicles are occurring at night, late hours when people are asleep and they walk around
So
and
I
they're
was
seeing
thinking
if
of putting
you.
a motion detector light. if
Right.
That's the case. And secondly, when you were talking about most break-ins are in and out in 5 to 10 minutes, I'm sitting there thinking, I have an alarm. It's gonna take 10 minutes by the time the alarm goes off, the alarm company calls.
Right, does it make an audible alarm?
It does, not outdoors, so it audible alarm inside, but not,
But loud enough that the neighbors will hear?
if they, I don't know, if they close the door.
Yeah, I mean, the audible alarm, from studies that have been in the industry, should make someone flee the area. Actually, the fact that you have an alarm should deter someone from even trying to break in. The noise, if they do continue to break in, should alert neighbors to call, so the response time would be twofold. The alarm company notifying, and your neighbors hopefully hearing the alarm and notifying us. So I don't want you to.
Because the alarm company, usually they try to call you before they, so you don't suggest that we say to the alarm company, well, maybe call the cops first before you call all 3 cell phone numbers trying to get hold of me?
You might want to call them and ask them what, how the industry is leaning in that direction, but obviously notification to us would prioritize our ability to respond to the crime rather than you.
So
I
if
just
there-
have one comment. Could you just tell people that the website, it came out on patch in the last week where you could go on and you can track the crimes in the area?
Yep,
Right. If you went on the Malden Police website,
Okay.
that would lead you to it, because I did it yesterday. It actually shows you a map of the city, and it's gonna show you the crime. So if you Google the Malden Police, it will show you.
right. So with that being said, I just wanna, I wanna wrap up. Okay, I wanna say on behalf of Lieutenant Molis, Chief Holland, all the men and women of the police department, Mike Crotty from Wire, Malden Access Television as always, and representatives from the mayor's office. Thank you for coming out tonight, and keep up the good work that you're doing.